Also, out of curiosity, for those of you who skipped last class, how many of you went back and watched the video? You just started to watch the video? How far? How far in did you get? 30 minutes Number 1 or 2? So, view control life cycle, what's it used for? Why do we need it? Why do we need to do that type of thing?
Connect to the view with the model pretty much. Allow some connection between what is seen on the screen and the actual data that is supposed to be represented there.
Okay, so that's an IB outlet. How we connect our variables to what's on the screen. We talked about last time. Life cycle, like view did load, view will appear, view did appear. What do we need those for?
To make sure stuff goes to the screen, and then if you go forward to a page and then back to it, you can change the information if need be on the page.
Gives us opportunities to interject with our app as our app is doing things on the screen. Right? So how many times does view did load get called? Once ever when it's first born. And this isn't an iOS app in general. Okay, we're going to be talking about the Apple Watch specific ways of doing things starting today. Actually, we're going to start doing some Apple Watch stuff specifically. We do have 7 on all the machines now, ish. All right, so during the life cycle, during the time that our applications, our iOS applications are running on a device, there are various events that occur when either a particular view is brought into existence, or it's about to appear on the screen, or it's about to disappear from the screen, stuff like that. There are multiple points in time that we might want to do something. And that's what this life cycle is for. It gives us points where we can interject some logic. Make sense? All right. So, we started doing this a little bit last time, where we created a simple little application. We did it within iPhone, so I could show kind of the IB outlet. Did we do actions last time as well? Did we like make a button work?
Yeah, kind of.
Or we just put a button on there?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, so let's do this in the context of a Apple Watch application. Now that we have Xcode 7 and all the machines down there, I did it with iPhone for 2 reasons. Initially, for Xcode 6.5 or 4, which was down there before, it would have supported all the stuff we did in class last time, as well as having the bigger screen lets us see the outlets and stuff like that better. Now, before I jump into that, though, we want to put this into context, because something I've already said in here several times is that what we're learning in here is applicable to any iOS device. Whether we're writing iPhone stuff or iPad stuff or Apple Watch stuff or now the TV OS, right? Stuff for that. It doesn't matter which of those devices. What we're learning in here is applicable to all of those. So what's the difference, do you think, between writing software for an iPhone versus writing software for an iPad versus Apple Watch versus Apple TV? Go ahead. Okay. So tell me a little bit more about that, because I think that's actually specifically poignant right now.
I mean, if you're using an iPhone, it's only in one hand, unless it's a 6 Plus. An iPad's a little bigger. My watch has a 2-inch screen.
Okay.
You interact with the app differently and everything.
Okay. So really there's a couple of things, a couple dynamics going on there. So let's just say different iOS devices. So one thing is, just because of the size of the screen, the types of widgets that are appropriate might change, right? So we can all probably assume that there are less total widgets for Apple Watch than there are for iPhone. Kind of makes sense, because certain things just don't make sense on the Apple Watch. All right, so different widgets.
And then in terms of how you actually use the device, especially between like Apple Watch and Apple TV. With Apple Watch, there's different things like raising your wrist to look at it. With the Apple TV, you can have multiple control phones as controllers.
Yep. So that's kind of the other side of that exact same coin, where as human beings just interfacing with these devices, we use them differently. So phone, iPad, iPod Touch, it's all about us tapping and dragging our finger around and stuff like that. With the watch, we do a little bit of that, but a lot of the interaction deals with that digital crown. So on this watch, we have this little wheel here that you think, how many of you have ever actually like messed around with an Apple Watch? Like physically, either gone into the store or something like that. How many of you have one? Just the cool kids? I heard what you said. Well, now, one thing that kind of amazed me with the Apple Watch when I first got it is I kind of had a mixed expectation about that digital crown thing. Kind of, is this going to be a really useful input device? It shockingly is. It's kind of amazing, actually, how precise it is.
What is it?
This thing right here?
It's like the bevel on the side.
Yeah.
Crown?
Yeah, it's you would think that it wouldn't be that big of a deal. It's actually an amazingly precise input device. So punchline for us in here is we should take that into consideration when we're creating our apps. So if you have a list on the screen, let's say, you could certainly flip through it with your finger if you want, but your finger is almost the size of the screen. So you're going to be blocking your view. So using that digital crown on the side becomes very, very handy. All right, so that's one difference that how we're interacting with the device. Having the smaller screen, again, we're probably not going to be doing our fingers and swiping and things like that as much on the actual screen. It goes to even a further extreme when we start thinking about tvOS. So I just got the new Apple TV in on Friday, the developer kit, and I put the beta OS on it, and I decided, okay, let's slap together an app real quick and just see kind of how it works. Well, take yourself away now. Now it's a device you don't touch. There isn't a such thing as tapping on a place on the screen or messing around with a device right there on the side. Our only interaction, our interface to that TV set is through this new multi-touch controller.
Or your phone.
Okay, well, same thing. It's still a multi-touch screen. So you're like, oh, well, that's not that big a deal. Well, iOS doesn't support a mouse. So you don't have this idea of precision, move cursor here, click. Move cursor here, click. You don't have that idea. So your apps have to be designed in terms of almost like a grid of buttons, if you will, where you can flip between buttons either horizontally or vertically, get to a place, click to go in there, and then it does something. Same thing. Keyboard probably isn't going to make a whole lot of sense, at least not initially, for tvOS. Okay, so, with the phone, you can ask them type in a username and password. Well, with the TV, you're going to probably be doing that either off of, a on-screen keyboard or possibly using the voice dictation to read in at least the username. Maybe passwords with the weird symbols and also saying your password out loud might be a little bit off. But punchline here is that even though we're using the same development language, the same development tools under the hood, we still solve all of our problems in terms of the tools that we have available to us. And for Apple Watch specifically, in terms of the relatively few number of widgets that we have available to us. Kind of make sense? All right, so let me just kind of throw that on this slide here. So different widgets are appropriate for different devices. And then we physically interact with different devices differently. And that's really a very new thing for iOS developers. Before this year, even though we had different screen sizes, we always interacted with our iOS devices in the same way. It was a screen of some size that we clicked and dragged around stuff on directly. Now the rules have changed a little bit. All right, so let's go ahead. I'm going to go into Xcode, and we're just going to create a new project. Okay, you do have another homework assignment up, and this one is to create your first Apple Watch application. So I'm going to give you kind of the background you'll need for that today. So we're going to create a new project. And last time I had you go under iOS application. We did a single view application. This time we're going to be going under WatchOS application, iOS app with WatchKit App. All right, so whenever we build a Apple Watch app, it has to be it's connected to a corresponding iPhone app. Okay, and we'll kind of talk about how that works later. At this point, we're just focused on the Apple Watch interface itself. So go ahead and hit next. Let's just call this one CSC390 demo, let's say. Something like that. Language will default to Swift. Device, doesn't matter here because this is all talking about the device behind the scenes, so you can actually have this interface with a iPad app as well if you're going to build a universal application. You get to choose which things you want to have on here initially. So with an Apple Watch app, we have a whole bunch of different scenes. We have really 3 different things: notifications, glance, and complication. We're just going to work with the notification scene initially. We'll talk about the different types. So basically, just click next. All right, here we'll put it in this folder. Oh, that's spring. That's not what I want. I want this. Actually, it just doesn't even matter. I'm just going to put it on the desktop. This is going to be a very temporary type thing for us. Okay. Now, right off the bat, a couple things that we're going to see here that we didn't see before. Before we just had this main application up here, but now we have another thing called WatchKit App. So this first guy here, CSC390 demo, this is the actual iPhone application. So anything we put in here is going to be part of our iPhone application. Then we have the CSC390 demo WatchKit app. So anything we put in here will be for our actual Apple Watch application. Notice that our Apple Watch has its own storyboard and our iPhone app has its own storyboard. Right now, we're just going to be messing around with the Apple Watch storyboard, not the phone. Okay? So everything we're going to do for right now is going to be inside of this little world right here, this folder. And here's our storyboard. Okay? Now, in order to run our applications, you need to set up your targets and stuff correctly up here. So right now, if we run this, it's just going to try to launch our iPhone application on an iPhone 6s Plus simulator. Okay, well, that's all fine and good, except we're not going to rate anything in the iPhone program. So we're just going to get a white screen over and over and over again. So first thing we want to do is over here we have something called the target. So you click the drop down on that. We're no longer targeting this the iPhone app. We actually want to target the WatchKit application. This guy right here, so the second guy down. Specifically, we get to choose what we want the simulator to be like. Do we want an iPhone 6 plus a 38mm Apple Watch? Or do we want an iPhone 6 Plus plus the 42mm Apple Watch? I would suggest you choose iPhone 6 with 38mm Apple Watch just for screen space perspective. They're all the same, well, the iPhone 6 and 6 Plus aren't necessarily the same aspect ratio, but the watches are. So from our perspective, do the smaller watch because you'll get a smaller iPhone simulator on the screen. So I'll go ahead and choose that. So notice here that it's changed. My target is now the WatchKit app, and the simulator that's chosen is the iPhone 6 plus watch 38mm. All right, make sure you do that first. Otherwise, when you run your application, it's not going to show up the way you think you want it to show up. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to hit play. We'll just run a blank application and see how this runs. So here's my pretty little Apple Watch simulator right here. Exhilarating. All right, so we have that running, and then we would see that we also have the iPhone simulator running in the background here. All right, even though we have nothing in it. So let's go ahead, just to prove that our app is actually running, let's throw a label in here. We want to learn how the layouts work. Last time we were throwing labels and some buttons into our view controllers for iPhone, and we saw we could pretty much put stuff any place, right? We had full control over where stuff goes. Let's see if that's true here on the Apple Watch. And how many of you in here have done some Android programming before? 1.25 people? So one thing that we will see here is actually the way the layouts work for Apple Watch are closer to Android than they are to iPhone. With the iPhone, we have this fixed screen size, let's say. Pretend like Apple doesn't have a zillion different size devices now. We have a fixed screen size. And on this fixed screen size, we can throw a button up in the left-hand corner or 8 pixels over for that. We can put it wherever we want. We have a lot of free-form ability. When you deal with a small device like this, you have the situation where you might have content that's going to span off of the actual screen size. Okay, so things need to be laid out in a linear or a horizontal fashion relative to each other because you might be swiping through the entire interface as opposed to your interface being presented on a single screen in general on a smartphone app, and then you're swiping from screen to screen to screen, that kind of thing. But for starters, let's just throw a label on here. So again, if you remember, actually, let's just do this. Here's our iPhone application side of it over here. And notice all of the widgets that we have here. That's all the crap that we can put on an iPhone screen through Interface Builder. Here's the equivalent for our watch. That's it. Okay, so anything we program for the watch has to be done in terms of the widgets that are supported on the device. All right, so we have something called an interface controller. So this is akin to our view controller. All right, we have something called the glance interface controller. Same diff, but for something called a glance, which is, well, we can probably make a guess at what a glance is on a watch. It's when it's a view for your application that only shows a couple of bits of information as if you're glancing at it instead of actually using the watch. All right. Then we have something called the notification interface. So this is also another view controller for a notification view, like when something pops up on the screen, something like that. For those of you who have an Apple Watch, when you get a text message or you get a notification from Slack, that Slack notification would pop up, and that would be an interface controller from notification. So whatever that looks like. So whether or not you get so for those of you who use Slack, we all wish that there was probably a reply button on that interface controller, right? But there's not. What do you have to do? You have to click on it, which then goes into the actual normal interface, and then you can actually reply to the message, as opposed to just hitting reply and replying, which seems like it would make a lot of logical sense, but whatever. All right. So outside of that, we have this idea of something called a group. And now this is where it starts getting a little Android-y. So when you're building interfaces on Android, you have like, let's just keep it simple. You have horizontal layouts and you have vertical layouts. So let's just say those are only types of groups that exist. Well, if you need to have some things that are horizontally lined up and then linear lined up, you might put linear layouts or vertical layouts inside of horizontal layouts and just nest these things together till you get the correct look that you're looking for. All right, same thing now becomes true with this, with groups, and we'll look at that here in a few minutes. Same thing's true with tables. Tables are far less powerful on watch than they are on a phone. You know, when we think about a table view on a phone, we scroll through, you get 500 things, something like that. You know, we have a little tiny screen on a watch. So watch seems to kind of go towards this idea of a picker view instead, which responds to the digital crown for which thing is the current selected thing. We can throw images on there. We can just have a layout separator. It's just a line. We can throw buttons, switch, slider. Here's our picker view. Labels, dates, timer, maps, a movie. We can have menus and then an item in the menu. So we'll look at all these things, but we see that we're limited to the number of things we can have on our screen, right? So then what do? In order to make more complex watch applications, we need to have multiple screens. So I'm going to start off by just throwing a label on here. All right. And we'll say hello. And let's go ahead and run this, and we'll see that hello shows up on the screen. All right, so first Apple Watch app. Hello. Now, final exam time. All right, so now, first of all, if this was an iPhone application, we would be able to take hello and we could drag it wherever we want on here. But notice, no matter where I put it, it keeps popping right back up to the top. Okay, so let's go ahead and let's throw a, well, let's click on hello first. And I'm going to go up here to our Explorer. And this guy's called the Attribute Inspector. And let me give us some space up here. So notice that we have a couple of things here for alignment. So I can click center.
That's just text alignment.
Yep, that's text alignment within that box. So it doesn't really do anything for us. This is justified. Actually, no, this is pixel justified based on how big the box is. So let's see. So this guy itself, we can horizontally or vertically align the text, again, within the label. Okay, so anything that happens in here happens relative to the label itself. We want to do something with the label relative to the entire interface.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I can click here.
Well, that's what the alignment does there, where it says alignment at the bottom.
This guy?
Yeah. Left
Well, yeah,
yeah.
but we're going to put it in a group.
Okay.
Yep, so I'm going to click on this guy here first. This guy here is our top level group. Just like on an Android application, we have a default linear layout. So anything we put in here would just continue to lay out crosswise. Let me throw another label in here and you'll see. So it's vertical by default. No matter what I do, I can't get something out here over to the side, so it's a vertical layout by default. And can I actually change it on here? I don't think we can without a group. No, we can't without a group. All right, so by default, we get a single container, and that single container is a vertical layout. Now, if I want to, so what he's saying is you can do this, and this is equivalent to Android's thing called gravity. I can come in here and I can mess with its alignment. Horizontally, I can say I want it centered. Vertically, I can say I want it on the bottom. Okay, so this is like Android's gravity feature, where you can say constantly put pressure on something until it pushes down onto something else underneath it. All right, so the important thing here is let's say I put another label on here, and then I make this label centered, and I make that label bottom. His gravity goes all the way to the bottom, displacing this guy because I did it second. All right, so doesn't give us the control that we might necessarily want for building out our interfaces. So typically when we're building an interface, we want to do this in terms of some groups. So I'm going to go ahead and take this label out. And we're going to go ahead and throw a group in here. Okay, so we want to think of groups as, you know, our layout containers for our applications. So I'm going to go ahead and create a group here. When we click on group, notice that a group can either be horizontal or vertical. All right, so if I make this a horizontal group, and I go ahead, which was the default, and I go ahead and I throw a label in here, notice it puts the labels horizontally right next to each other. Make sense? If I make it a vertical group, now the labels are on top of each other. All right, so what if I want to have a horizontal group with two columns that each column is vertical? You put a group inside of a group. You have a group with two groups inside of it. One group is going to be horizontal. So there's our horizontal group. Then we'll put another group inside of here. Oh, which one did I select there? That one's going to be our vertical one. And let's go ahead and resize. Let's get the other one in there then. Well, it's not looking so hot. Okay, there's the first one. Second one. Yeah, that's what I was concerned of. All right, so we got to do it over here. So this gets back over to the Android side of things. So can I drag it there? There we go. This is a problem you run into on Android fairly often, is getting things to drop in the wrong place. All right. Prior to this, whenever we're writing an iPhone application, you can pretty much differentiate your stuff from each other just manipulating them here on the screen. Well, now we have our external group here, which is horizontal, 2 internal groups inside of it. One's vertical. We're going to make the other one vertical as well. Okay, so these guys are right next to each other in there. We want to go ahead and drop a label in our, I think this is going to be left groups. Let's find out. All right, and we'll call this left C1. Put another one in here. Uh-oh. Click on this group. Left C2. Yeah, I actually did. Okay. Yep. So now we'll do, oh, look at that guy. So now let's drop a label in here. Is it gonna? No, not gonna let me hit it. Go to this group. Let's change his width. Let's just make his width 50. Good enough. So then this other guy's width, will make it 50 as well. Instead of relative to the container.
What's all the way across?
Yeah, it was like 137 or something like that. Let's see, is this 0.5, I think? So I can make relative to the container too. So if you want to deal with it in terms of percentages, we can make it relative to the container 0.5. So that gets us 2 groups, each taking up half. All right, so relative to the container will resize itself regardless of whether you're on the 35mm watch or the, a 42mm watch? It's 34 and 36 and 42. 38 and 42. The third time's a charm.
Okay, it'll be like an 82mm one, you know.
All right. So now we'll go ahead, and again, this guy is a vertical organization. So we'll say this is right C1. And this is right row. Right C2. Now what I want us to really get out of this is notice that I was able to pretty much pull it off inside of the application here, but sometimes you're going to have to rearrange over here. Make sense? And that was not something that happened very often at all prior to Apple Watch programming with iOS. Historically, I would say that interface builder for iOS was somewhere between 30 and 40 million times better than the interface builder on Android. Now it's more like 10 million times better. So a major step backwards, but whatever. But the interesting thing based on what we've talked about in here is the problems that we're having to solve here on Apple Watch, that we're absolutely forced to solve on Apple Watch, are very much the same kind of problems we've had to solve on Android for a long time, because Apple, that whole fragmentation thing that Apple doesn't complain about anymore. Okay? Because this is what it is. This is fragmentation. Right? We're using the same tool to design for different interfaces, and we finally have an interface that's just drastically different than the previous iPhone interfaces. Right? Before, you know, like, okay, well, I'll just design my app to work on a 3.5-inch iPhone. It'll just kind of scale to everything else. No harm, no foul. Okay? Or I'm going to make it work on the 6 Plus, and everybody else just has to suffer. Okay? Something like that. That was a very common approach by me. When I'm writing apps, I typically write them for myself, and they work best on the device that I carry, and every other device just has to suffer. It'll scale it down, so it'll run on there, but I don't try to make the apps look pretty anyway, so I have zero graphical design talent. But, you know, whatever. It's that type of thing. But what we're seeing here is something that's much closer to the experience we would get on an Android device. All right, if I throw another label in here, it's going to go underneath because I just put it in the outer group. So here's left, right, all in the same row, and this is the second row of that guy. Make sense? All right, so we can kind of build our interfaces up like that in terms of layering groups together. Important aspect. So we're going to go ahead and let's go ahead and throw a button in here. Okay, notice the button is underneath our first group. It's in our original group. It's vertically organized in here. All right, and we can center that guy if we want, and we can drop him to the bottom if we want, you know, whatever makes us happy, but we're gonna leave it at the center to leave it at the top so most of our interface is squished together so we can see it on the screen. All right, and we're gonna have this guy say, press me. Okay. And we have some other things, switches and sliders and stuff like that. We'll mess with some of those here as we get there. So I'm going to go ahead and run this. Now we should have our new screen that has 4 labels and a button. Okay. Now, one thing that I would really encourage you to do when you're writing a Apple Watch application is really try to squish as much content on the screen as humanly possible to the point that it's almost you're not able to tap. Punchline is we really have to think about how people are going to interface with our interface. So I think that makes sense, doesn't it? Interface with our interface. Different meanings of the same word.
Interface and verb.
Interact with our interface. But don't people interface with things?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
I don't know. Yeah, you might be right.
Just say the UI.
It's also a verb. Interact with another system, person, organization, etc. It's a noun and a verb.
All right, so legit. So that was an example of real life polymorphism. Same word with a different meaning, type of parameters. KK, thanks. Okay, so in any case, we're just kind of seeing how layouts work, and this is something to keep in mind. But do think about that once we start talking about actually working with our interfaces, that we need to take certain things into consideration. All right, now we need to give ourselves programmatic access to these labels. All right, so we're going to start off by doing that. And we talked about this last time, so the way we do this for Apple Watch is identical to the way that we do this for iPhone. First thing you're going to want to do is make sure you click on the yellow circle. This is your actual interface. On the iPhone, it'd be called the view controller. This guy is called the interface controller, whatever. Synonyms, okay? Then you click on the little, this guy's called the assistant editor, the 2-circle union dealy flippy. I don't know why they chose that icon, but whatever. So we're going to click on that, and what that's going to do is it's going to bring the associated code to this guy. So over here we have this interface storyboard that we're working with, and this particular guy that we're messing with right here is this thing called our interface controller. And let me prove that to you here real quick. So I'm going to go back to our interface storyboard. I'm going to click on this guy right here. We're going to go to the class that's associated with that guy, and it's called the interface controller class, which is right here, interface controller.swift. We're going to end up writing our own interface controllers. Maybe we'll call it page 2 IC or something like that for interface controller. But this is the code behind to this interface. And what's that an example of? When I have an interface and I have a code behind and they're linked to each other somehow but not directly connected, that's the MVC design pattern. So this is seeing it at work here in Apple Watch. All right, so again, I'll click on the yellow thing here. That makes it so that when I click up on this guy, it shows the correct code. Okay, the one that's associated with this particular view. So I'll go ahead and click on that. Brings the code up. And now what I want to do is I want to go ahead and give myself access to these widgets through variables over here. All right. So let me just give myself a little more space here. So here's my code. Let me do that. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and click on this guy right here. I'm going to hit Control, click, and drag. I can drag it over here, and this is going to make me an outlet. So outlets are how we outlets are how we create a variable that is attached to an actual widget. So we'll call this guy the left C1 label. I'm going to steal this guy right here for right now. Okay, and this guy's type is a WK interface label. What does WK stand for? WatchKit. NS stands for next step. Those are things we don't see. On the iPhone side, UI stands for user interface. Those are things we do see. For WatchKit, it's WK. Okay, so we'll hit connect. So now we have that guy. We're going to go ahead and connect C2 now. So hold Control, click, drag. Just drag wherever you want the variable to be in here. We'll call this guy C2. All right, so I just made, did I miss? I don't see the, everybody relax. Oh, it just didn't update in that little screen. Nice. All right, so there's two of them. So I connected those up through the little drag and drop dealie. What I'm going to do here now is I'm just going to copy these two lines and I'm going to write the other two. And we'll call this, this is write. Did I call it C1?
Creating variables, or is this actual data binding?
You're not binding data. You're binding these variables to those widgets, not the data in those widgets. Okay. So write C1, write C2. Is that what I named them?
Yeah.
Write C1, write C2. Okay. So right here, I've created two additional IB outlets. So that is interface builder outlets. So now this variable in code is being exposed to interface builder. Okay. Now, these first two, because of the way I built them, by doing the drag and drop method, have already been connected. These other two, because I did the cut and paste method, I wrote the code by hand, let's say, have not been connected. So we need to go and connect these two outlets. So we're going to go back into our interface for our watch. Expand this side over here. Start off by clicking on the interface controller, because the interface controller is our way of telling this guy to link to that code behind. All right, so now we have the right thing selected. And when I go over here to the outlets, we'll notice that two guys are already set up, but I have two new outlets, the right C1 and the right C2 labels. So you just click and drag a line to this guy. Click and drag the line to this guy. And now they're connected. All right?
Is there a way to do that with actual code?
Huh?
Is there a way, is that doing something with actual code, or is that just the only way to do that?
Is what doing it with actual code? I just show you the two ways of doing it.
No, but I mean, you still have to do the draggy droppy thingy.
Not for the first two. The first two
Right,
I did the.
Yeah, for the second two, well, at some point you still have to do the draggy droppy thingy.
You want to know, is there a way programmatically for you to connect it to this?
Yeah.
How could there be?
Why not?
Well, we don't have a unique way of identifying these guys in the interface. The alternative way of doing this on Android is every single one of these guys has a unique identifier.
Mm-hmm.
So you would say find ID by, or find find it by ID. Give it that so you get the unique widget, and then you can attach it in code.
So all labels are automatically just out there. They have no name. They have no GUID, no nothing. It's just a label.
Not just labels, all widgets.
So any element or whatever.
Yeah, all elements are just sitting out there, and if we want to have programmatic access to them, we connect them. All right, so now we have programmatic access to these guys. So let's go back into our code. Now if I run this, we'll see nothing's changed visually, except we actually have variables that are associated with our labels, so we can do stuff with them now. Okay, so what I'll go ahead and do here is just to prove we'll change left C2. So I'm going to go into my interface controller. All right. Now notice right here we have something called awake with context, i.e. view did load. Okay, so this is our view did load for Apple Watch. Our first time that we can interact with this guy. And we're going to talk about context next time. We won't need them for your assignment today. But what I'm going to do here is when this guy is first created, I'm going to go ahead and say, what did I say, left C2. Is it description that shows up on there, or is it text? Yeah, set text. And we're going to set the text to hello. Go ahead and run this. Now programmatically left C2 label now says hello. Okay, so we did that programmatically. Well, now we'd like something to happen when we click our buttons. Okay. Go back into our interface, storyboard. And again, I'm going to click on this guy right here. We're going to click on our share dealie here. And then I'm going to control click from the button over to my code. And we have two options up here for our connection. The default says outlet, but if I hit the drop down that, I can also connect up an action. All right, so I want to write a function that is connected to what happens when this button is clicked. Make sense? So we're going to say an action, and we're going to say this is the press me button clicked method. And we'll say connect. All right, so now when I go back into my code, let's close this. Notice I now have a press me button click thing. And what I'll go ahead and do is we'll set self.write C1 label dot set text equal to blah. But only when we press the button. Okay?
So is that connected to any timers?
Not a timer. It's connected to the event. And I'm going to show you the alternative way of setting up the event that we just did. Okay, so now I just click press me, and there's blah.
So it automatically just changes.
When I clicked press me, it called that action. Okay, but let me show you how those things are actually hooked up. So when I did the control click thing to drag the action into existence, we do this, we do this, then we do this. Notice here we have something called received actions, and the press me button clicked is already hooked up. All right. Alternatively, we can write our own IBActions. So I'm just going to steal this function. Call this guy press me to button clicked, and we'll set C2 label equal to woot. All right, so I've just created a function named press me to button clicked, does something, and I just happen to label it as an IB action, interface builder action. But because I did this programmatically without doing the drag and drop thing, it has not been hooked up. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and go back to my interface here, and I'm going to put another button on here. We'll call this guy press me to. Now when I click on our interface controller, you'll see I have another received action here that's not actually hooked up. So I can click and drag this to this button, let go, and now it's connected to it. Okay? Go ahead and run it. Now when I hit press me to, it changes that to woot. I hit press me, it changes that to blah. Hello was set at runtime, so on and so forth. Make sense? All right, so your homework for next class is to build your own interface that has a single label and a single button. And every single time you press the button, the next number in the Fibonacci sequence shows up on that label. Okay? So you're going to have to use some Swift programming logic, so things we've already worked on in the class, to calculate the Fibonacci sequence inside your application. I gave you a little link to Wikipedia so you can go and see how the Fibonacci works. But every time you click a button, it should show the next one. 1, 1, 2, 3, so on and so forth. Make sense? Questions, comments, concerns, bribes? All right, I'll see everybody on Wednesday.